Hello, my wonderful little collections of bones. It's me, Glass Lotuses, your friendly and mildly eerie digital artist, writer, and cat lover. How are you doing this week? I hope your day has been fun. My cat Shiso has been shedding like crazy now that the weather is warming up, and no matter how much I clean, I'm in a world of pollen and cat hair. Anyway, let's talk about the next god in the right hand of death. This is the second of the elemental gods, water, and he belongs in Order's court. Like I mentioned in the last video, I like to think of these elemental gods as states of matter as well, so you can think of him as the god of liquids. Now, let's get into the details. Tiburon is the god of both water and monsters, and he takes great pleasure in creating the nightmares who hide where the water is deep. Tales of monsters from the depths of the oceans are as old as sailing itself. Thus, it is sensical that the god of water should also be a god of monsters. Monster magic is often also referred to as deep water magic. Most of the divine realm where the gods spend much of their time is terrestrial, but I like depicting Tiburon as a mer creature. While all gods can change their forms at will, I like to think sometimes he swims through the air of the divine realm for fun, because gods can just break the laws of physics like that. Who needs real-world rules in a realm of spirits and gods? That aside, Tiburon is a rather serious and stoic character overall. He spends most of his time crafting the horrors which lurk in the abysses of the ocean and the darkest shadows of forests. Once he filled the seas full of fearsome monsters, enough to impede exploration, he proceeded to help the other gods populate their regions with nightmares to stop the mortals from going where they shouldn't. Most gods lived lives before they attained divinity. Tiburon does not speak much of his past, though, and other gods and spirits sometimes whisper that perhaps they wonder if he was ever mortal at all. He bears scars of large bite marks when normally gods decide to hide or erase any they ever got in life, leading some to believe that he can't get rid of them, and others to believe he is using them to suggest he had a life. Most gods can change their forms as they please, but there are on occasion some characteristics which simply seem to get stuck. Usually, these characteristics relate to how they became gods, but not always. In any case, Tiburon has been the center of much gossip and speculation, while he himself spends almost all of his time tinkering on new ways to scare people. Despite all the rumors, he is within Order's court, and Order cares little for rumors. So long as he gets the job done right, she will ignore any oddities. So, he spends his time putting a little fear into the hearts of mortals and other gods, as needed. His favorite creation of all was his own guardian Lofi, a giant shape-shifting leviathan with a taste for new and strange foods. Each of the 6 primordial gods has a door which connects to the mortal world, acting as strong conduits of magic between the mortal and divine realms. To keep mortals away from these doors, each is protected by a guardian and hidden by some form of magic. While some are reasonably accessible, and mortals would occasionally dare to try to reach them to communicate with the gods, Tiburon's door is hidden deep in an abyss at the bottom of the ocean, and terrestrial mortals are simply not equipped to reach it alive, much less to face the creature which guards it. About 1,000 years before our story with Sena and Calica began, the gods fought and tore each other apart, scattering their magic around the world. Water magic became one of the most prevalent forms of magic within the world, but deep water magic was fairly rarely practiced. There is a general warning and reputation that those who try to practice deep water magic often take a turn and become rather monstrous themselves, and do not last very long once the nature of the magic takes hold of their soul. In this drawing of Tiburon in particular, I knew I wanted to take inspiration from both very pretty fish like betta and guppies, as well as deep water creatures with all their glowing dots and stripes. So Tiburon has this big frilly tail and all these little glowing dots running all over his arms and chest and tail. The bigger spots on his shoulder and upper arm were intended to mimic something like a giant squid's eye. So if you were in complete darkness, you'd just see these two large eye-like things. But I ended up removing these in later versions. I go back and forth on whether or not I think mer creatures should have knees. On one hand, I think it makes them look better if they're in the sitting pose, and I think it makes sense if they're the kind of creature that shapeshifts between fishy and humanoid. In the drawings I've done of him, I do tend to go back and forth, though. If one considers mythology and lore, such as Selkies or Swan Maidens, then mer creatures having knees makes sense, given the thought of changing back and forth, for instance. Alternatively, people often argue that mer creatures should be considered mammals, and thus should have knees, because they have mammalian features, such as likely the bones in their ears, or they feed their young via milk. However, I feel that viewpoint is very human-centric, as a fish could just as easily argue back that mammals don't have scales, and some fish feed their young via milk-like substances as well. The discus fish, for example, has fry which feed off of a mucus produced by cells on the surface of the adults' bodies. So it's not like mammals are even the only branch of creatures which provide a handmade liquid-based diet for their offspring. Similarly, I go back and forth on whether I think mer creatures should have long or short hair. Short hair seems practical, but long hair looks so much better. Here I went with short hair for him, but I do change that up for him in the future. Another aspect that I vary with regards to mer creatures is their gill placement. Should it be on their neck or on the side of their ribs? Fish don't anatomically have necks, but there is a nerve in most animals which runs from the brain to the larynx in the throat to control voice, breathing, and swallowing. The shortest path there would be just a few inches, if that, in most animals. But instead, it goes down and loops around the heart and then comes back up to the throat, specifically because in ancient fishy ancestors, that nerve ran from the brain straight to the gills, and it was, at that point, the most direct route. As creatures evolved necks, that nerve routing just kind of looped and stayed longer than it would if it were a straight shot. Logically, then one could argue that the larynx would be where the gills would be. Also, on a fish, the gills are in front of their side fins, so the neck would technically be correct. Artistically though, sometimes I do feel they make more sense to be on the ribs. Really, I don't think gods need to breathe, so the point is somewhat moot here, but in this particular older drawing, I went with the more technically accurate version of the neck gills. I knew I wanted to give him some sort of necklace because it would look cool, and it would portray the water vibe more if it was kind of floating. Since he is a rather fishy character, I figured why not a fish hook. I do change his jewelry up though in different drawings, giving him more gold to complement his purple tones later on. In the back of this drawing you can also see a glowing anglerfish-like lure and large spiny anglerfish-like teeth. That would be Levi, the guardian, with a little school of fish swimming around the lure to give a sense of perspective. Also, I just want to say, I hate drawing rocks. The rocks under Tiburon were so hard to draw, and I really should practice drawing them, because even like 3 or 4 years later, I am still struggling with them. Overall though, this is my first visual iteration of Tiburon. I hope you like my little fishy boy. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. If you happen to hear any bells in the background of this recording, that would be my cat Shiso hopping around. I hope you enjoy this video. If you are interested in learning more about this story, the world, and the characters within it, please like and subscribe. There she goes.